I'm waiting in the school parking lot when I see her walking out. My granddaughter, 15 years old, moving through the crowd like a ghost. She gets in, drops her backpack, and just sits there staring straight ahead. I've raised 4 kids, watched a dozen grandchildren grow up, and I've learned to read silence. This isn't teenage moodiness. This is something deeper. "Talk to me," I say. She doesn't look at me, just keeps staring through the windshield at nothing. Then, so quietly I almost miss it. "What's the point, Grandpa, of any of this?" "My name's George. I'm 87 years old. I've buried friends, lost businesses, survived a war, buried my wife 2 years ago. I've asked God questions that never got answered and received answers I never asked for. But this question from a 15-year-old girl sitting in my passenger seat, it hits different. Because she's not asking philosophically, she's asking practically. She's asking, does my homework matter? Do my friendships matter? Does waking up tomorrow matter? And somewhere in my chest, an old wound opens up because I've stood exactly where she's standing, just 80 years apart. Here's what nobody tells you about getting old. You don't get wiser. You just get clearer about what you were blind to before. And what I've been blind to for most of my life is this. We've built an entire civilization around the wrong definition of mattering. Let me tell you about a man named Vincent who used to cut my hair. This was back in the 70s, a little barber shop on 4th Street that smelled like aftershave and old newspapers. Vincent was in his 60s then, hands shaking slightly from what he said was too much coffee, though I suspect it was something else. He'd been cutting hair in that same chair for 43 years. One Saturday morning, I'm sitting there and he's talking about his week. Not complaining, just talking, how Mrs. Peterson came in crying because her husband was in hospice, how the teenage kid with the mohawk was actually scared about his college interview, how the businessman who always seemed so confident admitted he was drowning in debt. And Vincent said something I'll never forget. "George, people don't come here just for haircuts. They come here to be seen. For 20 minutes, someone's paying attention to them, really paying attention. That's rarer than people think." Vincent died in 1982. Heart attack. The shop closed. Another business moved in, then another. Now it's a phone repair store. No plaque, no memorial. Vincent is forgotten, except by the maybe dozen people still alive who remember him. But here's what nobody calculated. How many people sat in that chair over 43 years? If he worked 5 days a week, that's roughly 55,000 haircuts. 55,000 moments of being seen. How many of those people walked out feeling slightly more human? How many dark thoughts got interrupted by Vincent asking about their kids? How many people made different choices because for 20 minutes someone treated them like they mattered? You can't measure that, can't quantify it, can't put it on a resume or a tombstone, but it ripples, it spreads, it changes the molecular structure of the world in ways we'll never trace back to their source. We've convinced ourselves that mattering requires scale, that your life only counts if it reaches thousands, millions, that significance equals visibility. But that's insane. That's not how humans actually work. I had this friend in college, Marcus, brilliant guy. Could have been anything. Became a high school guidance counselor instead. Spent 32 years in the same office with the same peeling linoleum and the same broken air conditioning. His parents thought he wasted his potential. His degree was in engineering. Could have made serious money. Last year I went to his retirement party. I almost didn't go. My hip's not what it used to be, and driving at night is tricky. But I went. That gymnasium was full of people I'd never seen before, and I watched in stunned silence as person after person told stories I'd never heard. The kid who was about to drop out until Marcus spent his lunch periods tutoring him. The girl who was being abused at home, and Marcus was the first person who noticed and got her help. The boy who was so lost after his brother's suicide that Marcus met with him every single day for a year. Not during school hours, after, on his own time, 32 years. Thousands of conversations, most of them forgotten by both parties, but scattered through that room were people whose entire lives got redirected because someone paid attention at the exact moment they needed it. Marcus never wrote a book, never gave a TED Talk. His name appears nowhere except on school records that'll be digitized and forgotten. But his life created more actual good than most people who did get famous. This is what I'm trying to tell my granddaughter, but I don't know if she can hear it yet. The world is lying to you about what matters. When I was 31, I lost my job. Engineering firm downsized. I had 2 kids, a mortgage, and no prospects. I spiraled, started drinking heavily. Eleanor, my wife, she tried to help, but I pushed her away. I was drowning and determined to drown alone. There was this guy at church, Carl. I barely knew him. We'd exchanged maybe 10 sentences total. One Sunday, he comes up to me after the service and says, "I'm rebuilding my deck. Could use an extra set of hands if you're free next Saturday." I wasn't free. I was planning to stay home and feel sorry for myself. But something in his face, he wasn't asking to help me. He was asking me to help him. There's a dignity in that. So I went. We worked all day. He didn't ask about my job situation, didn't offer advice, didn't pray over me or quote scripture. We just worked, measured wood, hammered nails, talked about nothing important. At the end of the day, he paid me. Cash. More than the work was worth. I tried to refuse, but he insisted. You earned it. That money kept us afloat for 2 more weeks, but more than that, I remembered what it felt like to be useful, to build something, to have someone treat me like I still had value when I felt worthless. Carl died 15 years ago, lung cancer. I went to his funeral and learned he'd done similar things for dozens of men over the years. Just quietly noticed who was struggling and found reasons to put money in their hands without making them feel like charity cases. Nobody wrote articles about Carl, no plaques or foundations bearing his name, just a trail of men who stayed afloat because someone saw them sinking and threw a rope. This is what I mean when I say we've got it backwards. We're so obsessed with mattering to everybody that we forget about mattering to anybody. Your life doesn't need to scale. It needs to be real. I was at the drugstore yesterday. The pharmacy tech, young woman, maybe 25, was dealing with an elderly man who couldn't understand why his insurance wasn't covering his medication. He was getting agitated, confused. The line behind him was growing. Most people would have just processed it coldly, moved him along. Instead, she took 10 minutes to call the insurance company, put them on speaker so he could hear, explained every step. The people in line were annoyed. I heard someone mutter something about efficiency, but I watched that old man's face, the panic subsiding, the dignity returning. Someone treating him like his confusion wasn't an inconvenience, but a problem worth solving. That woman has no idea I'm writing about her. She'll never know this moment got noticed, but she changed that man's day, probably his week, maybe longer. And I thought, this is what heroism actually looks like. Not dramatic, not viral, just someone choosing patience when efficiency was easier. My granddaughter is growing up in a world that's screaming at her every single day, "You don't matter unless you're exceptional, unless you're seen, unless you accumulate followers, achievements, recognition," and it's destroying her generation. I see it in her friends, the anxiety, the depression, the constant performance, the feeling that their ordinary lives, the homework, The friendships, the quiet kindnesses don't count, that they're failing if they're not exceptional. But here's the secret that took me 87 years to learn. The exceptional is overrated. The ordinary is where life actually happens. Every morning, Eleanor made coffee. For 46 years of marriage, I woke up to fresh coffee. It wasn't exceptional. She didn't do it dramatically, just quietly, consistently. And when she was gone, the absence of that small, ordinary act nearly broke me. Because that's what love is, not grand gestures, just showing up, day after day, in small ways that say, "You matter to me." The nurse who checked on my father every night during his final weeks. The neighbor who mowed our lawn when I had surgery. The teacher who learned how to pronounce my daughter's difficult name correctly and used it every single time. The guy at the post office who always asks about my hip. None of these people changed the world. But they changed my world. And that turns out to be enough. More than enough. That turns out to be everything. So here's what I want to tell my granddaughter and anyone else wondering if they matter. Stop trying to matter to the world. Matter to your world, the people in your actual life, the ones you see, touch, talk to. Pour yourself into those relationships. Show up. Be present. Be honest. Be kind even when it costs you something. That's not settling. That's not thinking small. That's actually understanding how change happens, how meaning gets made, how lives get shaped. You think you're insignificant? You have no idea what you're doing to people. That smile you gave the cashier might have been the only kindness she received that day. That text checking on your friend might have arrived the moment before they did something permanent. That time you listened without offering advice might have saved someone from drowning in their own head. You'll never know. Most of the good you do, you'll never see. And that's exactly as it should be. Because if you need to see the impact to do the thing, then you're not doing it for the right reasons anyway. I'm 87. I can feel myself winding down. And when I take inventory of my life, I don't think about the promotions I got or the money I made or the handful of people who know my name. I think about the time I drove 3 hours to be at my nephew's terrible middle school play, the arguments I chose not to have, the grudges I decided to release, the thank you notes I wrote, the phone calls I made just to check in, the moments I was present instead of distracted. These things felt small when I did them, like they didn't really count. But now, from the end, I can see. These were everything. These were my life. If this resonates, share it with someone who's measuring themselves against impossible standards. Comment with one small act of presence you'll choose this week. Subscribe if you want more truth from someone who's almost out of time and has no reason to lie to you anymore. I've got more to say while I still can, and I'd rather say it to people who are actually willing to hear it.